This is Rosemarie Ferrante, and today we are part of a continuing series presented by the Connecticut Council for Non-Adversarial Divorce. Connecticut Council for Non-Adversarial Divorce is the statewide nonprofit organization of Connecticut mediators and collaborative divorce practitioners. Our membership includes attorneys, mental health professionals, and financial specialists. Our mission is to change the way people divorce or separate in Connecticut by reducing conflict and improving the lives of family members, especially children. Today, I am joined by my colleague and my friend, Kelley Hopkins Alvarez. She is a licensed professional counselor who provides individuals and couples psychotherapy in her private practice in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Kelley specializes in co-parenting, discernment counseling, healing separation, divorce support, divorce recovery, individual therapy, and couples and sex therapy. Kelley is trained in mediation and the collaborative divorce process. Welcome, Kelley.
Hi there. Thanks for having me today.
There she is. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to be with you.
I'm glad to have you. So as I mentioned, CC&D members are divorce professionals from three disciplines, from the legal, mental health, and financial.
Right.
And we as divorce professionals recognize that the healthiest divorces are those in which the participants, the spouses, have support in each of those areas.
Right.
And so today we're going to be discussing the emotional support that mental health professionals such as yourself can provide when couples are in crisis. So let's start with marriage counseling, because I think most people think and know of marriage counseling. We're going to be talking about two other important processes that are available to couples in crisis: discernment counseling and healing separation. But if you don't mind starting, Kelley, with just a description of what is marriage counseling and how do you guide couples in that process?
Well, marriage counseling, also known as couples therapy, usually originates when there's some sort of unsolved negative cycle happening. So sort of what brings them to the process is this cycle. And most of us are in relationships, so we're probably not unfamiliar with this idea. This unsolved cycle keeps showing up. The couple tries to solve it. They build up. It builds up. A fight occurs. They make agreements. They say it's not going to happen again. They make promises, and it happens again. This negative cycle usually is in four main areas. It's usually communication, sex/intimacy, money, and parenting. The marriage therapy or couples therapy process is each person coming in and trying to look at their role and how the relationship got to this point. So it's kind of each person's coming in trying to look at their role. Honestly, they're coming in to talk about their partner's role and their impact on them. And in the therapeutic process, we are guiding them and letting them know that the larger part of the process is everybody's looking at their role to create an energy that everyone will self-reflect to see if we can overcome this unsolved negative cycle.
Thank you. And so then I'm guessing at that point, your clientele sort of shifts down two different paths. I'm guessing that sometimes the marriage counseling has helped people break down these negative cycles and have emerged as a stronger partnership continuing in the marriage. And then I'm guessing that sometimes people are starting to explore a different path and dissolving their marriage. Is that fair?
That's very well said. And we really want them to really think carefully of all the possible options here and to slow down. Speeding up is usually what happens when you're upset with your partner. You want the pain, the frustration, the disappointment, the trust issues to end. So your brain speeds up and tells you to do things, say things. The couples therapy process and marriage counseling is getting each of them to slow down and actually to start thinking differently to make better decisions.
So I'm guessing that that's a really crucial stage of your work. Helping people slow down, not rush to the lawyer's office, not rush to make decisions. You know, we like to say that a lot. When you're in a rush, slow down and really contemplate the next steps. And so how do you guide people? We're going to kind of segue into discernment, but just at that crucial moment, how are you guiding people, particularly if they are thinking of going down the path of divorce? How can you support them in helping them go through the process in as non-adversarial a nature as possible?
Well, first, it's creating the environment where they feel safe and comfortable to share with you. And they also feel like I'm not there to be the judge. So I often tell people I'm not a forensic therapist. My job is to listen to each of your experiences and support you. So as long as they know that and they get the sense that the therapist is there and is neutral, they're not neutral to abuse, they're not neutral to trauma, but they're neutral in that the the focus is that each person is a client and each person has to be sort of met with an understanding, because the couple is the client, but there's two separate people in the room. So does that sort of answer what you were asking, Rosemarie?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So as long as your goal is to create a safe space for people to be able to express themselves and to be able to make decisions with clarity.
Yes.
So let's assume for a moment that this particular couple is leaning towards going down the path of dissolving their marriage. What are their options in terms of therapeutic options to help guide them? I'd love for you to talk a little about discernment counseling. We will talk about healing separation. So why don't we start with discernment counseling and explaining what that is?
Sure. Well, discernment counseling was started by Dr. Bill Doherty. He's the originator and the founder, and it arose because a family court judge in Minnesota started to see roughly 3 out of 10 couples when they were signing that last document. I think it's called the divorce decree. Is that right, Rosemary?
Yep.
They were in the courtroom signing the divorce decree, and they were uttering things like, I don't know if this is right for us. Did we do all we could? That judge noticed that happening so often that he contacted Dr. Doherty at the University of Minnesota, head of the counseling department, to say, could you create a process to help these people? They obviously do not know why they are doing this. And from that process comes discernment, which is basically for couples, partners that are, you can tell that someone's leaning out. We call them mixed agenda couples. Leaning out means someone's really kind of not fully sure if they want to work on the marriage. They may not know what the right path is. Should they separate? Should they divorce? Should they work on the marriage? There's an ambivalence. So quite often we call them ambivalent couples. And when you're screening them, you can see it. People will say things like, I'm just so tired. I don't know if I can do this anymore. Generally, we see one person leaning into the marriage who, despite the issues, still wants to work on things. So therein lies the problem. The discernment counselor is working with two people who have two different goals. How did Dr. Doherty create the structure to help them? We review the 3 different paths that are open to the parties, which is number 1, continue as status quo. It's obvious they knock that out as an issue right away, because they wouldn't have come into your office if they wanted to keep things the way it was. Number 2 is having discussions of separation or divorce. And path 3 is moving to 6 months of couples therapy with divorce off the table. So we're talking to each member of the couple to try to, again, you'll see this phrase, what is their role, and how the relationship got to this place. That discussion occurs whether we're in couples therapy, whether we're in discernment counseling, and any of the other models that we discussed today.
Thank you. So what I'm getting is that during the discernment process, both spouses are going to gain some clarity as to why they are where they are. And then together decide which path are we going to take, which path is best for our family. And so, we often talk about, from the lawyer's perspective, you don't want to drag someone through the divorce process or be dragged through the process. And so if people go through the discernment counseling, and I've seen many of my mediation clients have done so with you, the legal process is much smoother. So when the couple together decides which path they want to explore, what are the next steps with you? It sounds like it's a very specific therapeutic step-by-step efficient process. Is that correct?
So if the couple has decided that path 3, which is the couples therapy process, is not really going to be for them, and granted, in the discernment counseling process, partners may have come in as initial discernment counseling clients, and they may have been referred from the legal process. And, quite often, it's not unusual. They want to try. So if with the individual portion of discernment counseling, and we should probably talk about that at some point, like what it actually looks like what is the structure of the sessions, because it's quite different from couples therapy. So in those individual moments when each person is working with the discernment counselor, and then we do the collective portion of the work, it becomes clear that there's been a very mindful and conscious effort to determine if there are goals to go back to couples therapy. And if each person determines their goals and we sort of concretize, these are the goals, and then we go into couples therapy for a minimum of 6 months. And if at that point, one or both members of the couple say, I'm glad we did this process. I'm glad we respected each other to try to look under every stone, essentially, but I don't think I can relaunch this marriage. Then we start talking to them about about options such as healing separation, or quite often they want to know the beginnings of what a divorce would look like. And at that point, I begin to send them to someone like yourself, Rosemarie, who will give them education on the process. They're only given those referrals once they can manage their emotions around the impasses, the stuck places, which sort of got them there in the first place. We don't really refer to the legal process until either through discernment or couples therapy, healing separation, whatever we're doing, co-parenting. Can they communicate around those stuck places? What will be the agreed upon behavior if we come to an impasse? That is key, because we don't want them going into a legal process, playing that out and not knowing why they're there.
And so many people do, right? And so that's why, and these are not the clients that you're seeing, but they're the people who aren't doing this emotional prep work and going right to the lawyer's office. And that, so much of divorce is fueled by fear and the unknown and the emotions. So the emotional prep work is critical to having a non-adversarial divorce process. And that doesn't make it easy, because there's still a process, right? There's still so much emotional work we as humans need to be doing, but particularly during challenging times, such as a divorce. So why don't we break down a little bit more the structure of the sessions when you are working with people in discernment?
So discernment is a process that is more intensive. So the sessions are longer, but we don't have sort of the idea in couples therapy, which there's sort of no end. We don't really know when we begin with couples what the end will be. Discernment, Dr. Doherty built into the model that when we begin with these couples, there will be an end to it. We don't determine the end. And so originally in the model, Dr. Doherty says it's 5 sessions. I've shifted mine over the years to 7 to 10 sessions max. Those sessions are generally spread out. They're not weekly. The reason they're spread out is generally I'm referring each person to individual therapy. That's a really big part of the process, because you're trying to do some of your own work. And remember, a lot of people have a sense of why the relationship broke down, but they don't always have a sense of what their role is. Occasionally, I have someone who takes too much of the role, like it's all on their shoulders. But in general, that's a big part of this process in discernment. What is my role? What is my own personal agenda for change during this time? They tell us in discernment in the training that it isn't necessarily treating the relationship, but we do want to see change in the parties. We do want to see that. And so the structure is they come in together in the beginning of the session. I work with them for probably 20 to 30 minutes. The first session is usually 150 minutes. So that's roughly 3 blocks of time that a therapist usually runs on 45 to 60-minute blocks. So it's 3 blocks for the first session. We're together for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then one goes to the waiting room, one stays with me. Then we switch, and the end they come back together. What are we doing in that individual time? We are not acting as individual therapists. We're acting as an agent of the relationship, essentially. Our training is that we're to remain neutral. We do not know the outcome. Each time we resume a session with a couple, we don't know what's going to happen. And sometimes they want to know, do you think we should be together? What do you think is going to happen? And Dr. Doherty was pretty firm that we need to remain open So they have a clean process, if you will, to work with. Um, Sessions 2 through 7 or 10, because remember I do 7 to 10, because I've found for me partners do need more time to decide, um, are 120 minutes, so roughly 2 blocks. And so we need to have enough time to both have the partners together in the beginning, where they're each sort of check in. I'm looking to see, does anyone have an idea of what path they're taking? Does anyone feel like sharing some of their personal growth? So we're not doing a lot of processing with both people in the room. That's couples therapy. And so if someone wants to do that, I remind them we could eventually transfer to couples therapy if you're really feeling you want to do that and both of you want to do that processing. Um, Sometimes there's a pause and people will stop at session 2 or 3, kind of leave the counseling process for a few months and then return. Sometimes they go on vacation. And at the 7th or 10th session, we don't say, this is the decision that you have to make. Again, it's always up to the partners in the room. But usually by then, people have some sort of sense of what's going on. And sometimes they don't.
So there are two things you said that I just found so interesting. And one of them is just sort of about human nature. You said that oftentimes people look to you and they want to know, do you think we can make it? Do you think this relationship can work? And I think so often we as people just want the answers and we want someone to tell us what to do. And so much of the non-adversarial divorce process from the mental health perspective, financial, and certainly legal is self-determination, being
Right.
able to make decisions with all the information available. And so what you're providing them is, again, like you said, a clear, clean process for them to come to those determinations, right? Once they've really explored all of the options. So I think that's so important and valuable. And the other takeaway from what you said, and I may have had a little bit of a brain block on this, is this isn't linear. So it could be marriage counseling thrown into discernment. You might go back to that process. And while discernment is very structured and specific, it sounds like people can go from one process to another depending on their needs throughout the process. Is that fair? Is that true?
So what I love about working with you is you have this ability to grasp from this other field these nuances. Yes, absolutely. And the reason that they can go back and forth is because you're working with two people, and for whatever reasons, guilt, fear, they want to try, or someone in their family said, you should really try this. So yes, it's not linear, but whatever role we're taking, and in the beginning and the formation of discernment counseling, we are permitted to be both the discernment counselors, to be the couples therapist. We have to disclose, though, what we're doing and when we're doing it. So if there are partners in discernment that begin to want to process a lot, I have to go, guys, I'm a couples therapist. There's nothing I'd love to do more than that, but that is not our goal. That's actually rehashing at this moment. If you want to go to couples therapy, it would mean that you both have identified that there are major challenges in the relationship and that both of you are leaning in to the relationship. So we create a safe space of vulnerability, which is that therapy, digging deep. So that's a really big takeaway for discernment, is that the bulk of the work is in the individual time with me, but I'm not your individual therapist. I'm asking you questions like, what have you done on your own to try to repair this relationship? How has that worked with your partner? How often have you tried to have healthier forms of conflict? How often have you said, I'm sorry? Do you validate your partner when they speak to you about a problem, or do you all of a sudden block it? I'm helping them review their own behavior. I'm helping them review sometimes their sexuality. I mean, as I'm also a certified sex therapist, so sometimes I'll have a client who they've shifted since they've partnered with this person, and they want other things to be added to the relationship from an intimate perspective, and the other partner is not at that place or doesn't identify in that way. So it could be any number of things that we're reviewing in those individual times. And then we come back together in the end, And I've worked with each person in general to think of one or two things from my time with them to share with their partner. And sometimes it's putting in a boundary. Typical boundaries are, I'm not sure I want to stay in the same bedroom while we go through this process of discernment. Maybe it's removal of a boundary. Maybe they haven't spent any time together. And as a result of both of them committing to this transparent process of discernment, could we walk the dog together on the weekends? Could we take the kids out together? There's any number of things that could result in those sort of, we call them couples checkouts at the end.
And it's such hard work. I mean, relationships, whether they're with our children, whether they're with our spouses or our romantic partners, are so, I wish that you would teach these things in a high school, right? When young adults are starting in relationships, because you hear it all the time, and I hear it in mediation sessions. People always are looking at what the other person didn't do or did, as opposed to doing the hard work, which is, how did I play a role in this?
Right.
And doing that through a discernment counseling prior to the divorce is so important. Could you imagine if everyone did that? Divorce would be a completely different process, and it would not be an adversarial process, right?
And in addition to the non-adversarial portion, which is so crucial, as individuals leaving that relationship, I'm invested in them learning about their relationship style. How do you bond and attach to people? Do you immediately bond in an anxious way, an insecure way? Are you a secure bonder, and do you attract people who are more insecure that you have to take care of? Like really digging into, who are you? Who raised you? And if you've had trauma, you can work through that trauma to the best of your ability with the right help and time. Who do you want to be? So that's also part of the discernment process of how will you be as a functioning person out there in the world who will most likely begin new relationships.
Exactly right. And we all know that the divorce rate for second marriages is higher than the divorce rate for first marriages. So this work is not only important for ending your first relationship, or whatever this relationship is, this marriage, respectfully and compassionately, but it's also going to serve you well in your future relationships. And again, whether it's with your children, whether it's with a romantic partner, your family, whomever, it's just so important. And I just so value the work you do with people. I'd like to shift to healing separation. And so, this is another process that many, many people are not aware of, that's available to them as a couple. So can you describe what a healing separation is?
Sure. That was started by Dr. Bruce Fisher. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, and didn't get a chance to really spread that model as much as Dr. Doherty has. Basically, I'll start with saying that in many cases, when partners come in either through a referral from the legal process or just finding me other ways, they may have already initiated some sort of unofficial separation. They're in a separate bedroom, or just conveniently staying with one of the kids, or someone is snoring or has a bad back and they have to be someplace else. I would say that because people are coming in with that arrangement, I have to talk about it as part of discernment counseling. It's become overlaid in many cases. And if it's not overlaid initially, sometimes at least one person is feeling the need for space. And they might try the space in a different bedroom. They might try alternating time in the house. So healing separation, when he created this model, it doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship is going to be healed. It means that the person is going to be working on their own self-growth. So therein, we see the connection to discernment counseling again. That model also stresses your own personal agenda for change. What are you doing during this time, this in-between space in the relationship, to bring your better self to the relationship? Dr. Bruce Fisher also created a document, a basic structure of sort of like a template of agreements that people who are in this place could make. Will we all be together with the kids as a family on the weekend? Will we continue to share money? Will we be emotionally monogamous, physically monogamous during this time? Will we spend holidays together? And that's the tip of the iceberg, as you can imagine, with a family and all of the options and couples. There's many portions in the document to customize. This is a fluid document. This is not a legal document. This is created by a mental health provider, because my role in this process is as a neutral mental health provider. I make that very clear. I cannot do any of the roles that Rosemarie takes care of. I deal with the behavioral and sort of the emotional part of the separation or divorce. The sessions with healing separation are always with both parties, whereas discernment, there's a lot of individual one-on-one time. Generally, with healing separation, I'll wrap this up really quick, we have to work on the home environment, which also includes co-parenting. And I know you wanted to, with our time left, also briefly touch on the importance of co-parenting. We could do a whole show on it.
I think we're going to. In fact, I think that that's what we should set up for next, is a whole show on just co-parenting and co-parenting counseling. One of the things that is interesting on healing separation is currently where we live with this housing market, many times people find themselves in a situation where they're living together longer through the divorce process. So these ground rules that you're talking about in terms of how we're going to live in the same household if they're not actually physically separated is so important. So people are aligned in expectations. We are almost out of time, Kelley. I knew this would happen. We can talk forever. Thank you so much. I would love to do another show on co-parenting counseling.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. That is one of the most important parts of this process.
Okay. Well, until then, thank you so much. So in closing, divorce need not be destructive. With the right support, we know that spouses can end their marital relationship and especially if they have children, beginning their co-parenting relationship with respect and compassion. Please go to the CCND website, the Connecticut Council for Non-Adversarial Divorce, gooddivorcect.com, if you want to reach out to any of our professionals. Thank you so much.
Thank you.